Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Lighthouse Sessions. I'm excited. Today I have my friend Bob Bryenton with me. And Bob, why don't you tell everybody what you do today? What is your job?
Well, I am a bladesmith. I make knives, swords, art out of steel after 34 years as an IT professional.
I love it. And everybody, for the record, I reached out to Bob in my recollection that he was an IT professional and asked to be on the show. And he actually said, I don't think I'm a fit because I do this instead. And I went, what? Whoa, whoa, whoa. You're definitely a fit. So, Bob, let's talk about, first of all, how does one become a bladesmith? What was that path? Let's talk about that journey.
I used to travel a lot for work. I was on the road 3 days a week, and I would literally go into a hotel room and turn on the TV, and there was nothing on other than this silly show called Forged in Fire. And then I'd come home, and I told my wife one day, that looks like it could be a fun hobby. And so for Christmas one year, she bought me an apron and a set of hammers. And then from there's this thing called YouTube. I might have heard of it. I just started watching YouTube videos and started hammering, found out that I seemed to have a knack for making this stuff. People seem to like it. And then literally as my career went on, layoffs started happening, and we were at a point where retirement looked like it might be an option. So I threw away the computers, picked up the hammers, and here I am today. It's now my full-time gig.
I love it. And for what it's worth, I am cool by association, because when I told my kids I am interviewing a bladesmith, both of them, my eldest wanted a katana and my youngest wanted the master sword from Legends of Zelda. So as far as they know, I'm the coolest guy, I have the coolest job because I hang out with people like Bob today. So I love, and for the record, I used to watch Forged in Fire a lot, and then I realized that it was probably a hobby that I wouldn't benefit from because it would be a little bit hot and noisy for me personally. But I do love the art of it, and just taking a raw chunk of steel and then they go away, do their thing, and hours of toiling, and then they come back with this beautiful piece. And even the swords and the knives or whatever they build, I would say that's all art. It's truly art.
I think that's what you are, because the reality is people don't need a sword today.
Yep.
Interestingly enough, though, it is legal to carry a sword in Canada.
Really? So
Yeah.
I could walk up and down the street. I feel like that would cause some problems, but
well, people might get excited, but
yeah,
legally you can carry a sword. Anyhow, no, I loved Forged in Fire, and the thing that it's good and it's bad, because what Forged in Fire shows you are all of the sexy parts of the craft.
Yeah. How many hours do they cut in a project, for example?
Well, that 1 hour session takes 1 week to film. I was actually approached by casting to be on the show, but then COVID happened, and that kind of paid to that. But it's a 1 week session. What they don't show you is they always show you all the hammering part, the stuff where the forge is going and everything else. But what people don't realize is that's probably only 10% of the work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of time spent with sandpaper, files, making sure everything fits together. All of that part of the craft is really boring to watch, because you're sitting there watching a guy move a file back and forth.
But I would bet it's meditative for the guy moving the file.
I enjoy it. There's a lot of guys that don't, and that's why when you look at the craft, there's various qualities of work. Some people like to sit and put a nice finish. Other people, they want the excitement of the forge and the hammer. But it's all that fit and finish that makes the nice piece.
God, that's a metaphor for life as well as business, isn't it?
Yeah. No, then that's very true, right? I remember coding. There were people wrote unit tests and produced great code. And then there were other people that said, I don't have time for that.
Yeah. I don't have time for the fundamentals. I want to do the flashy stuff.
Yeah. So
I love it. So literally your current business grew out of boredom on the road.
pretty much.
I love the entrepreneur origin stories because it's if you're an accountant, a lawyer, a baker, you kind of planned that for a while. You went to school, you did the studying, you learning. Most entrepreneurs, there's a spark, and when that spark ignites, it becomes something. I'm guessing you spent years learning the pieces of the craft before.
Actually, I'm only into it for 4 years, Jeff.
Wow, the stuff you create, and that's 4 years in. I can't wait to see your.
Well, but there's a little bit of I love the movie Field of Dreams, because if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
And this was never intended to be a business. And I'm very fortunate that I've found people that like my work. And I'm getting customers from all over the world, collectors, people doing gifts for corporations, heirloom pieces. I'm completing a set of a father giving each of his kids as they turn 14 a blade with their coat of arms and everything else on it.
Nice.
I've lucked into this. It hasn't been a business plan.
Now, Bob, I'm just going to interrupt for a second. Your video just dropped.
Okay.
We see the great Kazoo snapping his fingers, so I don't know what he's doing. There we go.
Okay. My apologies.
Oh, no. The story is the important thing. Now, you told me one that really touched my heart, and I'm going to paraphrase, and you can tell as much as you're comfortable. It was a father who found out he was terminal, and he created something for his daughter. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it was actually a friend buying it of the gentleman that had leukemia. He loved to cook, and he loved beer while he cooked. And I got a really strange request. He wanted me to make a chef's knife, and the only requirement he really had in it is it had to have an incorporated bottle opener, so he could open his beer while he cooked. And then we etched into one side of the blade the father's name, because it was going to be passed down to his daughter.
I love the legacy gifts. I mean, that's my world, everything is my boys, and what can I leave them that matters? And I love thinking about I'm a ghostwriter, so I'm not going to get you to create a steel keyboard, but we'll find something. Pens for sure.
There's a lot of times people are looking for an heirloom gift. Yeah. Something to pass down from their family. That's kind of lost in our society right now. Swords and knives are actually becoming a thing, an heirloom piece, because they last forever. I mean, I recreated a copus for a collector, but what we used is a museum piece as a template. Nice. For the piece. And I've got tools that'll trace the outline and everything else. But that is becoming a real thing now for people to say, I want to leave something to my family. What is that? Yeah. And so they'll go research their coat of arms. They'll have that put on the pommel of a sword or into a mosaic pin in the blade, something along those lines. And then it becomes something. You're never going to use a sword today. At least I hope not. But it becomes something that can then sit on a mantle, be framed on the wall, that says, this is my family.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, the doomsday sayers say that World War III will be fought with nuclear bombs and World War IV will be with sticks. So, swords might come back.
Hey,
Hopefully not.
I've got a T-shirt that says "Blacksmithing." It's a post-apocalyptic life skill.
Absolutely. I'm not kidding, but I know a lot of people in prepper communities. You'd be their god or mayor or whatever when if
Well,
the lights go out.
in a couple hundred years ago, when every village had a blacksmith, the blacksmith actually had more power than the mayor when it came to civic voting and stuff. Because if you lost your blacksmith,
Yeah,
you didn't have a community.
I
He was
love
the
that.
one that he was the one that made all your tools, your wheels, your plows, your shovels, your axes. And so he was actually the most important man on campus.
I love that. Well, let's talk about heirloom because I think, we live in this world where I won't name names, but I can go to the mall and I can get something. I can buy some trinket and have it engraved while I wait. And then people think, oh, this is an heirloom. And it's like, if you spend $100 on it, it's probably not heirloom quality. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I would say that. The other thing that to me that makes an heirloom is something handmade. One of the reasons I literally started doing YouTube videos was to prove to people, give them some of the provenance of the piece. This was made from this raw steel, this raw wood, and this is now something that's handcrafted for you and your family. It's a one-off.
Yeah,
I don't read. I won't make you the same knife I made somebody else. I'll
I
do
love
something
it.
similar,
Yeah.
but yours must be unique. That's the service I offer.
I
Uh,
love that. And, honestly, for my mastermind, I'm thinking 12 unique but commonly themed gifts for each of my mastermind participants.
well, that's what one of my last orders is it's a father giving a blade to each of his kids. Each blade is different, matching the characteristics or the personalities of each of the kids. They're inscribed. One's a broadsword, one's a dagger, and one's a rapier.
Wow.
Each is inscribed with a different word, but it was to match the personalities of each of his kids. And that's what I to me, my most favorite piece to make is when you say, much like the Copus that I made, my client said, I'm of Greek nationality. He lives in New York. Um, I'm fascinated with Jason and the Argonauts. And I have a real fascination with Medusa.
Ah,
What can you do? And I'm going, whoa, you kind of spread the spectrum here. But we came up with a really unique looking piece. Um, and he loves it. Um, it's eye catching. And
well, and I think we're in this age, despite what the news would have us believe, I think we're in this age of unprecedented prosperity, and people want, I love the fact, we didn't mention this yet, but the fact that you actually built the house that you're in. People want something that matters, that was made by a real person, for a real person. There's that personalization.
I think there's a couple of TV shows that are on. There's Forged in Fire, obviously, but there's Blowing Away, where they blow glass, the Great Pottery Throwdown. There's a lot of these, I'll call it craftsman challenge series.
Yeah.
And some of the success that I think that's in those series is people are getting back to seeing people work with their hands that create something. And I think that's where the success of those TV shows go. They're not the typical reality show where you have to belittle somebody or anything else. You're
Yeah.
grading people on their craftsmanship, what they can do and imagine.
I love that. And I will say, I used to live in Bermuda and they have a glassworks there. And every time somebody brought tourists to the island, had a visitor, I volunteered. I'm like, I will take them to the glassworks. And so I was like the private guide, and I could stand there for hours watching the guys blow the glasswork. And, it was just amazing. The world they lived in, they were, there's probably about 5 guys at any given time, and they were like the best of the best. And this was kind of, they wanted to blow glass and live at the beach. So Bermuda worked for them, but just to see like an ugly lump of something, it was like just there was powders and there was lumps of glass and all of a sudden it was like, wait, that became this? Like it just, and in front of me, it's like people say magic doesn't exist. You haven't watched a craftsman make something. I mean, it's
if you go to a Renaissance fair or anything along those lines, quite often they will have a blacksmith's demonstration. Or if you go to Fort Edmonton Park, they keep getting volunteer blacksmiths there.
Yeah.
There's always standing room only. Like people love watching that work and seeing how something comes alive from literally a block of steel.
I love that. I think it's just now. Sorry, this is a very practical question, but I'm curious, so I have to ask. Where does one go? Do you have like a steel supply store? Like, where do you get your steel from?
That's probably one of the more challenging things that every beginner starts with, and it's actually really easy. Forged in Fire actually does our community a disservice because it's a competition reality show, and so they want you to make something out of scrap metal or junk. The reality is I will never use that in a blade that we buy. So quite often people say, I've got a leaf spring. I'll trade you a leaf spring for 2 knives. And
straight up trade, right?
Yeah. And really that's the cheapest part of the whole blade is the steel.
Yeah.
And I would never use something like a leaf spring because the reason you've got it is it broke.
Yeah.
Which means there's probably microfractures in that steel that I can't see. That'll only show up the first time you use a blade.
Yeah.
So there's a number of different suppliers across Canada and the US. Obviously, you want to buy from Canada because then you paid stupid duties going across our border.
Yeah.
There's a guy out in the Edmonton area here. There's a guy out east. There's a guy in BC. There's a guy in Kelowna. A guy in Calgary. They all supply steel. Now they buy it probably still from the same sources, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But we use a number of different steels too. To you and just about everybody else is probably steel. When I order steel, I will specify numbers like 15N20, 1084, 1095, 5160, 52100, W2, 4140. Like what that specifies are the components that are in the steel. And whenever you make a knife, it is always a trade-off between the hardness and I'll call it the toughness. In other words, is it flexible? Will it last long? Because I can make you a really hard knife and you'd think that the edge would stay on that really hard knife. The reality is it doesn't because it's so brittle it chips off just by cutting into the bone on your steak. Right. So there's always a trade-off whenever we're dealing with what is your intended purpose for the blade.
Well, for what it's worth, I'm a farm kid, so I know enough to know there's certain parts you use on certain parts of the tractor, and it's different. You don't take just raw steel from somewhere, weld it onto the PTO because it'll fracture and
be gone in a second. Yep. It's okay. So if you're a farm kid, you totally understand this one, right? But yeah, to a lot of people, steel is steel. Yep. To a bladesmith, there's about 50 different steels I will choose from. When you come talk to me about what you want, one of the first questions I'll ask is, what are you going to use it for? And that's going to start driving the discussion of what kind of steel we're going to use.
Awesome. Well, if you don't mind, let's have an actual real, for my audience and for my benefit and yours. Okay. Let's shift gears and talk about challenge coins. I don't know why, but I am obsessed with them. Just to show you as an example, a friend of mine sent me this. Oops, there we go. And I don't know what it is. I have ADHD, so I'm a fidgeter, but I like to have something that I can give as a meaningful gift. So let's. Go ahead.
What you're asking is, I'll call it the latest craze.
Yeah.
I actually just purchased a fiber laser so that I can actually make some of these. Actually, it's more for helping with a lot of engraving on my blades.
Yeah.
A lot of people want a coat of arms. I'm doing a blade right now for a soldier in the Vaduz. And he's got his company logo on it. He's got some words of "We will never forget" in French and things like that on the blade. I have a method of doing that now, but a laser will give me a broader range and make it easier. Challenge coins are a part of it. I'm learning, like everything, it always looks easy until you try it.
Well, I just want to, for my audience, because again, if nobody believes we're entrepreneurs, here's how it goes. I remember our conversation, and you can fill it in. And I know you didn't buy the laser because of me, but as soon as we started talking about coins, next thing I know, oh, I bought the laser, and you sent me the what you bought, and I immediately, being a weirdo entrepreneur, I Googled it, and I was like, ooh, and I was sitting watching videos on people making coins.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'm going to pay Bob. And just for the record, I can get these things made in China for, I don't know, 50 cents. They come from a soulless factory and some poor child labor has made it. Or I can pay Bob, and I don't even care the price with Bob because they're heirlooms to me. Yeah. But Bob, just so you know, the price is going to include me coming and sitting there watching. I will come and pick them up.
Okay.
I was
perfect.
I was watching it like, Bob, you sent me down this rabbit hole. Thank you and damn you. You know, it's just...
Well, here's part of my. There's always buyer's regret, and I bought a machine that will work really good for my blades. The problem I'm finding with the coins is it takes about 5 hours per coin.
Really?
So it's not something you sit and watch. So I only bought a 20-watt laser. I should have maybe looked at a 60-watt laser, but that also triples the price.
Right.
Right. So part of it's coins would be a side gig to doing what I do on the blades.
Well, it's something that you can, it's an extra value add you can do while you're busy working on the real stuff.
Well, and that's the nice thing, because once you start it, all of the work for a coin is actually in the design and layup, I'm finding.
Yeah. And I'm discovering too.
Yeah. The art is not, you get a piece of art, but then you have to create a 3D depth map to actually make the coin. And like everything, it looked really easy when I read about it.
Well, I'll share from my perspective, Bob, because I sent it to my graphic guy and he's like, you want what now?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, just Google it. And he's like, I'm going to charge you for that. I don't care. And yeah, like I am a do-it-myself kind of guy, and I'm going to be honest, Bob. One of my thoughts was I just buy the machine, and I'll justify it somehow. And then I'm like, no, I want Bob to do this. But then when I talked to my designer, he's like, well, have you thought of this? And I'm like, I don't know what you're saying. Like literally, he was using words I've never heard, and I'm like, I feel like this is a conversation between you and Google, not you and me, because like he was asking about pixel depth. I don't know. The words did not make sense. It was like he just opened a random dictionary and flipped pages and read words to me. But he's like, you do realize there's a lot of depth to this. He designs, just between us, he designs round logos. And I'm like, oh, that's easy. You just take it and put it on the coin.
No, you can do something as simple as that. But if you really want the nice looking coin look, you have to create something called a depth map out of it. So
this was not built in Canva, I promise.
Yeah.
It's funny because Bob's had the machine. I have my idea what the design looks like, and now I'm back and forth with my designer. And I'm going to be honest, he's starting to not like me as much because he's like, did you know you need something? There's like a grayscale, and then there's a depth map. And I'm like, again, words that don't mean anything to Jeff's day to day. I'm an author. I write. I'm an AI guy. I play with technology. Don't ask me to describe, the depth of the coin and, which shade of blue does it come from and how does that shade come out? And Because yours, it's etched, it's laser etched. Is that correct?
That's correct. So it's a fiber optic laser, and what it does is it literally burns away the brass on the coin.
Nice.
So they're not colored; they're just 3D coins, much like the quarter in your pocket.
Yeah.
But it's like everything. It's the initial learning curve, the setup. That's the big challenge on doing something like this.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
and for what it's worth, I went to, I was looking and I'm like, okay, what do coin blanks look like? What do they cost? The answer is it depends. Like, I can go to Amazon and again get some from China for 20 cents. And I'm like, I feel like that's probably somehow radioactive waste,
well, here's the thing I've already learned is not all blanks are equal. They all say they're brass.
Yeah.
But it's only the better brass coins that provide a repeatable result.
Yeah.
So the problem is I bought a bunch of the really cheap ones.
Yeah.
And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, because you can actually see the chemical composition of the metal composition of the coin is not homogeneous.
Wow. So it's burning differently then.
So then it burns differently.
Wow. Again, back to craftsmanship, knowing your materials, because I looked on Amazon and I found 10 different kinds of coins. And then there's some silver ones. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to ask Bob about that. But then I realized, you know what? Bob's the guy. I'm just going to say, Bob, I need coins and I'm going to let you worry about the rest.
And then to me, you're my perfect customer. I've received some very precise specifications on stuff.
Yeah.
But honestly, some of my favorite work, much like the guy in New York, he kept asking me, why are you asking me? You're the artist. And that to me is where you get some of the best work. It's like when you go into a restaurant, if you just ask the chef to make his favorite dish,
yeah,
you'll get a good meal.
Yeah. I always ask my wait staff, what's your favorite dish? I haven't thought about the chef, but that makes way more sense. But I always ask the staff, what's your favorite? And the amount of joy they take describing it, I'm like, I'll have that.
Yeah.
And then you get people come in and go, but I have some substitutions. It's like, get out of my restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I hear you.
So I think, and for the record, the people that are going to watch this, the people I'm going to send it to, they're avid hunters. They are outdoors people. And really, truly, I would say this about almost my entire network. They're parents who deeply love their kids.
Yep.
My kids and I, we have a running joke, have I told you today how much I adore you? Only a billion times, Dad. But I love the idea, and my boys want to meet you more than they will admit to me. But I love the idea that this will be a connecting point between us, and you'll forever be part of our story. And it'll be like, remember that time we went and watched Bob make our coins or do whatever we do? So let's talk about what does working with Bob look like? Because I know you're really busy with trade shows and things, but let's assume I've got somebody who's got a budget and they're willing to drop 10,000 US on a sword. I assume there's a way they can reach out, connect with you, and find out what that process looks like.
Yeah, I have a web page. One of the really nice things about my past life is I understand IT, I understand a little bit of social marketing, I understand a little bit of SEO. So I've put together a web page that is really a portfolio of all my work. There's nothing to buy on it because all of my work is spoken for right up until October. So there's nothing to buy off my website. You can place an order. When you place that order, I take a small deposit to cover material. And then depending on what it is you're building, or what your dream is, it can take me anywhere from a month to 3 months to create. The first step is you and me sitting here, just like we're doing right now, whether it's virtually or if it's local, I'll meet with you in person at a coffee shop and we'll talk about what do you want? Why do you want it? What do you want to use it for? Yep. And then I'll come back and I'll give you a design and a quote. I get a lot of people that ask me right away, how much does it cost? And
That
that's
is
like,
the wrong question for bespoke.
well, but it's also, how much does a car cost?
Yeah.
Right? It could be $30,000. It could be 300,000. What are we
Or
doing
3
with it?
million.
Right. So I want to meet you. I want to understand what you're using it for. Um, that'll help me drive design, materials, and everything else. Um, and then from there, we'll come up with, if you go to the designs page of my website, you'll see a bunch of the designs. There was a really neat one that I did that was kind of off the wall. It was a mechanic had passed away, and his children wanted a knife made from all the materials in his toolbox.
Oh my God, you're gonna make me cry. That is amazing.
But it's kind of neat because then you look at it and you go, okay, I get it. This is not a knife people are going to use daily. This is going to sit
Yeah.
on a mantelpiece and whatnot. And
And
so,
these are not Sears quality tools. These are toolbox tools, right?
yeah, these are mechanics tools.
There's actual iron or steel in there.
Yeah, yeah. So we came up with a design. Other ones are along the lines of, like I say, I did a historical copus called Medusa's Revenge with a dagger mounted, all in an ancient Greek style.
Yeah.
So we sit and we come up with a design. That design is never 100% the finished product.
Yeah.
Because every time I start making something, I'll realize that design element doesn't work, or I'll come up with a better idea. And I'll give you a phone call and say, you know, this would really, really look better with this material or this shape. Or the last set of swords I'm doing, I had created a very sharp quillion. And when I started picking up the pieces, I went, this doesn't work because it's going to be dangerous to anybody picking it up. And so we blunted it down a little bit and changed the shape, made it a little bit safer for somebody to handle. Right, looked cool in the drawing, but it's going to hurt the person picking it up. That's not what we want. So it always changes.
Well, and I would say that again, if you want standard, consistent, go to Walmart and buy in bulk as opposed to dealing with a art. So do you consider yourself a craftsman or an artisan? Or
Both.
something else?
Both. The other thing that they do, and see, I get this all the time too. I don't know if you know what HEMA is, the historical European martial arts. Those are the guys that dress up in armor and swing swords at each other and do sword fighting in historical European garb. It's a real sport, but I get a lot of guys starting in that sport. They will order something online and then bring it to me to fix.
It's got
because
made in
they obviously
China.
have they have some very serious rules about, you know, the blades have to be blunted. They have to, and I feel so sorry because I've had a number of guys come to me and they go, I can't fix this. And it's what they've done is they spent $180 on Amazon and gotten an overseas sword that isn't a hardenable steel, that isn't right. And that one guy showed up with a helmet, nice looking costume helmet. Like if you're going to wear this on stage, perfect.
Yeah.
But he asked me to harden it, and I said I can't. I don't know what it is, and my guess is from just looking at it and the price you paid, it's a mild steel, which means the first hit is going to cave in your skull.
You might as well make something out of aluminum cans in your garage.
Right, but if you want to wear it to your Halloween gig or on stage, perfect. So I get a lot of that.
Ceremony, the parade afterwards, but not in battle. So
yeah, so I get a lot of that kind of stuff, and I don't mind. I love educating people. I do lessons. So if you and your boys wanted to ever come down and learn how to make something, I do it very much as we sit down first. So I've done lessons for somebody completely new. The last set of lessons I just did was for an established knife maker wanting to refine some of his process.
Well, for what it's worth, Bob, I'm going to throw this out. And yes, my boys and I, we want to come and do a day lessons. We would pay admission to watch somebody else doing the work. I'm not kidding. So
You're not the first guy that said, "Can I come watch?" And I don't have a problem with it, except it's really boring.
Yeah.
Like I said, the local newspaper literally last week just did an article on me, and they kept begging to come see me hammering steel, and I kept trying to say, like, I just don't do that often.
They're looking at Forged in Fire, right? They want that 30-minute or whatever it is episode, and no, I just think it would be fascinating. Like I used to stand around watching glass get blown for hours. So to see the for me, it's about watching the craftsman, not about the finished good. I don't need a sword to magically appear in front of me. I just want to see, and I am one of those weird people. I would sit there and watch you sanding, and
the one thing that, and I'm pretty firm on these kind of rules. Like, if you do come to the shop, you need steel-toed boots. You need eye protection. You need some sort of hearing protection. A lot of what we do is loud.
Yep.
And I tell everybody the minute they come in the shop, everything in this shop is actively trying to kill you.
So you don't have "don't touch" stickers everywhere, because you spend all your time child-proofing, right?
Well, actually, go check out some of the forums and see the number of people that have burned themselves as they start.
I grew up on a farm. It was like, oh yeah, that's the hot end of the welder.
Yeah. Well, but so I'll heat steel up to 2200 degrees.
Yeah.
When it's glowing white, not to touch it.
Yeah.
Problem is I'm going to set that down somewhere, and it's going to start cooling off, and it's going to turn black very quickly.
Yeah.
Problem is, it's still 1100 degrees.
All right, now Bob, I have to wrap up. I could talk to you all day, and just fair warning, we will pay admission to come watch you, and we will be coming and hanging out with you. Where would you like people to go to come connect more? Do you want them on LinkedIn or straight to your website?
The website is the best place, and I'll be really honest. Since I hung up the computers, I'm just not online that much anymore.
I love it. Well, I will send people to the website. Last thing I'll say is I know somebody who worked with the Transformers movies, and he was in charge of their merchandising. I feel like there's going to be some fun products coming between you and I. So I want to thank you for being in my world and hanging out with me this morning.
Jeff, it's been a pleasure. Honestly, I love talking about this stuff. So it's been a great hour.